Good afternoon, good evening to everybody who is joining from different parts of the world. On behalf of the organizing committee of PIMARC, it is my pleasure to invite all of you for the Doctoral Colloquium session of the PIM's conference. It's my great pleasure at this moment to introduce and welcome the expert panelists of this session. We have eminent researchers, very well known in the world of research, who have published a plethora of research papers, who have supervised very many PhD projects. All of them are very well known. Firstly, we have Professor Amrik Sohal, who is the Professor of Management, Department of Management, Monash Business School, Monash University, Australia. Professor Amrik is no stranger to Sri Lanka. He has conducted research conferences here and he has a special interest in Sri Lanka and conducts lots of collaborative research with us. We have Professor Jim Rooney, who again has been very much involved in our PhD programs at PIM. He's been part of PIMARC in the earlier years as well, and he has played active roles in our PhD programs in various workshops and so on. Professor Siong Choi Chong from Malaysia. He is the Chief Technical Officer, Quality Assurance Finance Accreditation Agency, Malaysia, and a visiting faculty of Management and Science University, Malaysia. He has published many papers as well as supervised a whole lot of PhD projects, including many, many Sri Lankans, of which I am privileged to be one. The session will be moderated by Professor Pavitra Kailasapati, who is very well known to all of us. Professor Pavitra is the professor in Human Resource Management, Faculty of Management and Finance at Colombo University. Professor Pavitra will be moderating this session. So with that short introduction, I'll hand over the sessions to Professor Pavitra to take it on from here and to coordinate the 4 presentations that are to come. Thank you very much, panelists and Professor Pavitra.
Thank you, Dr. Sakuntala Buddharatnam. So without delaying anything, let's start off with the first presentation so that we have enough time for the 3 panelists to give feedback and have a discussion on these proposed research. So first I call upon Ms. C. Janadari Vijayasinghe to make a presentation on the quality of unregulated non-state higher education amidst massification, commoditization and marketization. Yeah, over to you, Janadari. I can't hear. Are you talking or not started?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody.
Okay.
Let me start with my research study. The title of my research study is Quality of Unregulated Non-State Higher Education amidst Massification, Commoditization and Marketization. Actually, with the liberalization of the economy from 1977, Sri Lanka has opened up the higher education sector into the non-state higher education sector. With the massive expansion of the higher education in all these continents, actually there was immense kind of expansion in this era. And in Sri Lanka, 6% of young people between age 18 to 24 years were enrolled into the state universities, according to the World Bank report in 2017. And rest of the proportion actually entered into the non-state sector. And total proposed student intake of 2020 and 2021 academic year for University and Universities Act in Sri Lanka is presently 41,755, only out of total students set for GC advanced level examination. This is based on the University Admissions Handbook, Sri Lanka 2021. So these facts actually, I'm just bringing out just to emphasize the fact that we have just 17 universities and proportion of 40,000 or 41,000 students are admitting annually. The rest of the students are actually leading to, they are going ahead with the foreign universities or go overseas or register with external degrees. So considering this background, actually, education is a human right for all throughout life, and access to education must be matched by quality according to UNESCO 2030 Global Agenda. So this is the prime factor that I'm bringing out these background facts and winding education inequality in a country, and argues that higher education cannot be left to the free market in the peripheral countries of the South. This is the big argument in debate right now. So considering the preliminary study that I have carried out, so in order to come up with this problem statement, non-state higher education sector right now actually do not have a proper legislative mechanism or monitoring system, and its growth and credibility has been questioned many times. According to the report on the core group on higher education for reforming the higher education sector in Sri Lanka, so according to the preliminary study that I have carried out, center approval has been taken by foreign universities 90%, and 10% has been taken nearly by just signing MOUs. And this emphasized that no periodical academic audit has been carried out properly and no QA mechanism in place in non-state sector in higher education. These are some of the outcome of this preliminary study to embark on my problem statement. And this emphasizes the performance gap actually. Regarding, despite the limited regulation carried out in the non-state sector of higher education, the number of fraudulent cases reported has been increasing daily. Impact of this on the stakeholders are enormous. So this emphasizes the widening the inequalities in the non-state sector. And theoretical gap is actually based on this agency theory, actually brought by this Jensen Amrik 1976. And the theoretical gap emphasized that the role of agency theory has been only nominal also in the mainstream of this higher education literature. And considering this empirical gap, actually, I just want to emphasize that consequences emanated from this contractual relationship mentioned in the agency theory is actually not emphasized previously, and unregulated sector of higher education has never been tested in Sri Lanka. So despite this fundamental policy shift, there has been no substantial scholarly attempt to understand the effects of marketization on Sri Lankan university education, except limited number of scholarly revisits. So this has been never tested previously regarding the non-state higher education sector, especially the contractual relationship prevailing in the agency arrangement in this non-state sector has been never tested out. So this, I hope that an empirical gap is clear to all of you. And when it comes to this problem statement, I want to highlight that how principal agent theory being employed in the field of non-state higher education amidst deterioration of higher education service quality due to massification, commodification, and marketization. So basically, I'm going to emphasize on this research question, what are the causes and consequences of massification and marketization and commodification of unregulated non-state higher education sector? Why we are talking about this research question is basically there is unprecedented growth in the non-state higher education sector, and basically in Sri Lankan context, we value education. It's a kind of a value-based model, but with the unprecedented growth in the non-state sector, there's a huge marketization process going on, and student is considered as a kind of a consumer in case of purchasing this kind of a commodity. So it has gone beyond the value-based model. So that was the research research question, and how the quality and standards maintained and achieved in the unregulated non-state higher education is the second research question. So my research objective is actually to contribute to the existing body of knowledge regarding the antecedents of massification, marketization, and commoditization of higher education emanated from contractual relationship between parties involved in the unregulated non-state sector of higher education, to provide a better theorization of the contractual relationship affecting the status quo of the quality of the unregulated sector of higher education is the second objective. And to the last, but the final objective of this research is to incorporate my finding into the non-state policy formulation, what is right now carrying out in Sri Lanka. So I have carried out the literature review just to understand the dependent variables and the independent variables. For example, this GRAB 2003, 2005A OECD has mentioned the massification of higher education has resulted in the rise of new sorts of institutions as alternatives to traditional universities in several nations. So these are some of the variables I have taken out of this literature review. My theoretical background is based on two theories, basically, agency theory and the revenue theory, of course, was put forth to explain the financial trends of the higher education. Agency theory, I have taken this just to emphasize the contractual relationship between the non-state sector. That is what is most prevalent right now. So agency theory actually speaking about just the contractual relationship, but here in the non-state sector, the consequences emanated from that relationship and the learning outcomes and the quantitative outcomes are not actually in force. So I have just embarked on the concept indicator model based on the independent and independent variables. Marketization of higher education, massification of higher education, and commoditization of higher education have taken as independent variables and dependent as quality of unregulated non-state higher education. The conceptual arsenal provided by this agency theory, divergence of interest and information asymmetries between these parties involved in the contract is explained in the concept framework here. This contractual relation between principal and agent actually has drastically an impact on the quality of the unregulated non-state higher education sector. Some of the propositions are elaborated here in my slides. And then theoretical implications, I just want to point out that this contribution was never highlighted in the context of unregulated non-state higher education sector. So it's just a theory in the management focus, not in the higher education sector much more. So when it comes to the managerial implications, this is the most important contribution that I would like to make out of this research study. This study is significant as it reveals how Sri Lanka's unregulated non-state higher education sector is performing, especially with respect to behavioral aspect, participation rate, and learning outcomes. And the study addresses how can Sri Lanka face the challenges at each stage of this unregulated non-state sector of higher education, and which policy interventions should we take. And this kind of a scenario is present in case of these managerial implications, because right now universities are facing a kind of demand for accountability. So massification, commoditization, marketization, these three variables are present right now in the non-state sector rather than the state sector. So a kind of accountability is a question here, and the analysis of existing state institutional framework to regulate the non-state sector provides insights that empower the managerial capacities within the state system requiring this policy change. So considering the originality and value, I just want to emphasize in the higher education sector, even though agency theory has taken slightly, this has never been addressed in the non-state sector of higher education. I mean, emanated from this contractual relationship. Basically, agency theory is emphasized on the contractual relationship, but here we have taken the contractual relationship into the non-state sector, the consequences emanated from that, and what kind of a contribution which we can do here. for the existing body of knowledge regarding the incidence of massification, commoditization, marketization of higher education, and critical constraints. What are the critical constraints on quality of unregulated non-state higher education providers that hinders the inclusive growth? And this study can be identified as the first attempt that theorizes contractual relationship and the outcome amidst massification, commoditization, marketization of unregulated non-state higher education sector. I'm just focusing on this unregulated non-state higher education sector in Sri Lanka and the contribution actually from the agency theory. So therefore, the theoretical manifestation embedded here enlightens and paves the way to understand policy failures in the governance of the non-state higher education sector. So this further reveals that this study addresses how can we face the challenges at each stage of unregulated non-state sector of higher education, and which policy actions should be can we take as a country. And regarding the QA mechanisms, the existing QA systems and Sri Lanka qualification framework have not been investigated through these theoretical perspectives. And this research study contributes insights of an original theoretical value to this field of research. So these are some of my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vijay Singh. So first, I will let the panel give you their comments, feedback, and then we will see if there is anybody in the audience who would like to make any comment. Can I first call upon Professor Sohal? Would you like to start?
Thank you very much. I believe you can hear me. Thank you for your presentation, Janadari. A very fast presentation. You covered quite a lot of material there. Just some very basic questions for me to start with, if you don't mind. When you're talking about the non-state education sector being unregulated, I'm not quite clear exactly what you mean. Does that mean I can go and set up a college there tomorrow? Or can from around the world? I don't know what you really mean. And when you also refer to the contractual relationship, who are the two parties between which this contract exists? Could you start by just focusing on those two questions, please, if you don't mind?
Yes. The first
I'm sorry, I'm not able to.
I will answer for the unregulated non-state institutes. Non-state institutes are not monitored by any of the parties. If applied, only the Ministry of Education non-state division is actually looking after only few of the parties, but not the entire sector of the Sri Lankan non-state higher education. So there's a massive crowding out in case of the non-state higher education sector, especially unregulated. You can understand just one day, if you want to start up a institute, it's that much easy. You just have to take a center approval from the foreign university, or you can just start up with a MOU with the foreign university and just establish a company here. It's a kind of such a commercialized aspect here, what is right now. There is an unprecedented growth here, it's happening. And the second question is regarding the contractual relationship. Contractual relationship is between two parties here. The foreign university is the principal, and the agent here is the Sri Lankan party involved. And between these two parties, they can have either a center approval or a MOU arrangement. So there is no legitimate aspect here. No one is monitoring. And I hope that...
No, it does. So what you're saying is that there is really no oversight by the Ministry of Education.
Yes.
Colleges and universities being set up. Yeah. So
yes.
that's one problem in my mind, right? And hence your quality framework, your national quality framework, has no serious implications for the non-state sector at all. But these non-state colleges and universities have been operating for a good number of years and have many graduates. What is the evidence that the quality of the graduates and where they're going is much inferior than the local graduates? Do you have that sort of evidence as well to really say that that these non-state foreign type of organizations operating in Sri Lanka are not delivering what they ought to be delivering?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. I'm talking about the unregulated sector of the non-state higher education. There are 30 institutes here in Sri Lanka, which is under Ministry of Education non-state division, that is properly monitored under Sri Lanka qualification framework. But there is massive crowding out in case of non-state unregulated institutes affiliated to foreign universities. The graduates passing out are like this. They just take the exemptions from HND or some other kind of diploma, and 1 year is enough to take the bachelor's degree for them. And they take the employment opportunity or some other place, even the government places. But when you are really working with the employer, you will feel what is the outcome. So there is a clear difference here. Even in the graduate employment program that we have employed in the Sri Lanka here, we have understood what is the outcome of the foreign graduate who have already passed out just 1 year or 2 years. That's what I'm mentioning.
Yeah.
It's unregulated and monitored, not monitored. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, sure. I think that's probably enough for me in the first round of questions. I'll pass on to others.
Thank you.
Professor Chong.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I echo Professor Amrik in saying how pleased we are to look at your interesting research. I think Professor Amrik raised a fundamental question on why is this topic necessary? Why is it so important for you to look at, without which, what will be the consequences to the quality of people, the quality of education, the quality of services that these people are contributing to the nation, to the community, to the society, and so on. Perhaps what I would like to find out will be, again, some fundamental issues. I've seen your, I've read your short proposal. You have identified quite a number of things in your proposal which sort of allowed me to think and rethink of what are you looking at in your research, right? For instance, you cover massification, you cover marketization on one hand. Then on the other, you mentioned about service quality. You also mentioned about quality assurance, which can be very different from service quality. And you also mentioned about government intervention, looking into how government should play its role to regulate these non-state institutions. So I'm wondering, how are you looking at those variables? So perhaps you can enlighten me on what are the independent, what are the dependent variables, what are the relationship that you are looking at in your model? Yeah, thank you.
When it comes to this basic title, the quality of unregulated non-state higher education, I took three independent variables: massification, commoditization, and marketization. So it's right now happening. So massification is due to the unprecedented growth in the non-state sector. Actually, there is not regulated at all. And then commoditization, when it comes to the student perspective, that is, student has been positioned as the consumer in the higher education sector, especially the non-state sector. Previously, historically, we consider education as a value-based model, but right now it's kind of purchasing a commodity. That kind of a commercialized aspect is present here, and that is what I have mentioned the commoditization and taken as an independent variable. And then marketization, under that there is no question of marketing a commodity like this now in the present context. That much the student has been positioned so much in the commercialized aspect. And there's no question of having a proper outcome then, because it's just bachelor's degrees actually coming out 1 year. Out of 1 year, you can take just a bachelor's degree of some of these non-state institutes. So it's kind of the outcome of this massification. This is what we have mentioned here. We need to regulate the quality aspect of this. And then that is why the Sri Lanka qualification framework is present. And we need to monitor all these things from the student perspective. And the quality of unregulated sector, I have taken in my concept model. Actually, quality of unregulated non-state higher education, we have taken as dependent variable here. So all this massification, marketization, commoditization, the impact is quality of unregulated non-state higher education sector is actually, that's getting poor and poor further because of this massification, crowding out situation, marketization situation. Unregulated sector is emanating, crowding out. And this contractual relationship between principal and agent I have mentioned here in between. This contractual relationship is not quantified properly. So because of that, there can be, bad consequences on the quality of the unregulated, non-state higher education.
Janandari, hold on. Professor Sohal wants to say something.
I just want to say, sorry, just thinking about what's being done and what is being said here. My thinking is so far, and with limited sort of having read the literature and so on in a limited way, the context seems to me is the non-state education center, which has opened up. Okay, the words marketization, massification, commoditization, they have overlapping meaning to me. Okay. And they describe to me the context of the study. Okay, if I'm going to do a study to assess the quality of what is being offered, okay, then in a contract, I want to examine, what sort of facilities do they provide? What sort of atmosphere do they provide to the students? What sort of staff qualifications do they have? Et cetera, et cetera. It's how in this context of marketization and commoditization and massification, whatever you call it, that is the context. That is what is happening. Okay. And for me to now assess the quality of what is being presented, and in that relationship, in a contract, I want to examine, are they doing the right things in terms of providing a campus experience, right lecture theaters, proper staff-student ratios, and everything else that we demand of a university campus for a good quality education. For me, this marketization, commoditization is a given now. It's the context. I want to examine whether there is a good relationship between the outcome, which is the high quality education that's being provided, and all of the inputs. Some of them may be captured in a contract, which is, do these providers in partnership with a foreign university provide what is needed in terms of a good content, good environment, good facilities, good computing facilities, so and so and so and so. They are the variables, if you like, to me. And context is the new environment, the marketization and the massification that has happened. I'm not sure if I'm now thinking on the right line. The other two experts can say something. I'll stop talking.
Exactly what I was also thinking about, that they are the context and not really the independent variables. I totally agree with you, Professor Sohal. Professor Chong, are you done, or shall I hand over to Professor Rooney?
Yeah, I'm fine for now, but later
Okay.
on,
Sure.
I may need you to enlighten me on the measurement.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay. Professor Rooney, over to you.
Professor Rooney, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. So thank you again for your presentation and your good work in this area. Very highly topical. I don't have much to add to what Professor Chong and Sohal have said already. My question really was, given the way concepts like marketization and massification have come from different areas other than economics, it's going to be very important to define your variables really clearly. And I'm not clear what those definitions of massification are, particularly given if you take that concept, it's a marketing concept. And a lot of the qualities are not expressed in terms of economic variables. They're expressed in other forms, maybe psychological. So I don't want to spend more time talking about things that the good professors have already talked about, but I think it is an important consideration in terms of being very clear about what your variables are. And I'm not 100% sure that that's been nailed down. That would be my comment. I mean, I think it's a great area and I think it's a very important area, but so we say this with due consideration, but I think there's some more conversation to be had about the definition of variables.
Professor Rooney, Professor Chong, yeah, you continue and then.
Thank you, sir.
Professor Chong, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Can you enlighten us on how do you intend to measure your variables? Especially, you have your 3 independent variables. As you have explained to us, what are the aspects that you would be looking at in each of the independent variables? Of course, at this stage, we will be more than interested to know how are you going to collect data? What kind of data that you plan to obtain from your research? And this is especially interesting when your dependent variable is going to be quality. The question now is how are you going to collect data to a certain what is good quality, what is not a good quality? Is it by perception or are you using a performance data?
Yeah, I'm actually planning to collect data based on this qualitative methodology, focus group interviews, basically, I have conducted a kind of a pyramid study based on the MOUs and the documentary analysis and a few stakeholder discussions and focus group discussions with stakeholders like parents and students. Basically, those are the main stakeholders in our country. And then based on the pyramid study, I have embarked on this problem statement, and data will be gathered in future also on the very structured interviews and focus group interviews and this qualitative methodology further. I have to actually further study on that matter.
Yeah, we raise this question because we do not want you to hit the wall at one stage of your research. It is interesting. It is very interesting. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, it is a very interesting, as mentioned by Professor Amrik and Professor Rooney. It is definitely a very interesting part of research, looking at the current condition. But again, we do not want you to hit the wall at one stage where you realize that data was hard to get. So it is very important for you to operationalize. And I think Prof. Pavitra also mentioned a very good point here, the level of analysis. How are you going to get data and on what basis? Normally, when we look into quality, if you know, logically speaking, if we ask people, who are against the non-state education sector, they will definitely say no to quality. But to people whom you are talking to who's graduated from a non-state education, they will definitely say, well, the quality is good, is superb. So how do we then now strike a balance? What kind of objective data that we intend to collect? And how are we going to collect those data to ascertain that, oh, this means quality, this means no quality? How are we going to look at that? So that is one aspect that you may want to seriously consider, not just by asking questions on perception, because again, you will likely end up in a situation whereby one group will tell you, yes, the quality was good, but the other group will tell you otherwise. So how are you going to advise the policymakers in terms of how should they regulate the non-state sector moving forward? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yes.
Anybody in the audience would like to say anything before I have I have few comments as well. Anybody? I'm not sure whether there is any. Are there audience in the hall? Janadari, are there people in the?
Yes. Zoom on. Yes.
Okay. So anybody in the audience would like to say anything? Anybody has any comments? If not, I have some comments. Okay. So in addition to Janadari, in addition to what the panelists have said, I too have an issue in terms of quality. Your so-called dependent variable, you have termed it as quality. So when you use the word quality, it's like quality of what? Is it quality of the so-called output, quality of the staff's teaching, learning? Is it quality of the student services? So there are, because quality, even if you look at from the quality assurance manual that we are supposed to follow, there are different aspects of quality, right? Admin part,
Yes,
the
yes.
student services, the teaching.
So I have to specify those things. No?
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's very broad, I would say. And my other concern is now, as part of answers for Professor Chong's question, you were saying it's going to be qualitative research. So if you're going to do qualitative research, your model had a moderator and all that. So in qualitative research, you can't really test for moderators. That's a very quantitative research where we will have moderators and mediators and all that. So I sort of feel there is this mismatch. I know you have used the word concept mapping or conceptual, not conceptual model, but something else. But still, when you have moderators, you won't be really able to so-called prove, or, you know, prove is not the word, but, you know, test it out. Then, as I had mentioned in my chat too, the level of analysis, again, if it's qualitative research, it's okay. But if you're going to do a quantitative research, quality would be at the higher education institute level. Whereas the relationship is about like a dyad, right, between two organizations. So from whom are you going to look at that contractual relationship, the quality of those relationships? And as Professor Sohal rightly mentioned, it doesn't really make sense to have your 3 IVs of massification, commoditization, and marketization, because that's the context in which these organizations or these institutes are functioning. So And also another detail that you need to look at is in your research question 1 said causes and consequences of these 3 things. But if you look at your concept map, you are not really looking at the causes of marketization and all that. And I feel that's out of your scope. You don't need to look at that. Things have happened. That's sort of at the economy level. You, in your research about quality, you don't need to look at the causes of marketization and all that. So you would need to make sure your research questions are really about your research problem that you have identified, right? That they need to match what you really want to study.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your constructive comment.
Any last words, any other comments from the panel? I think.
Yeah, I might just say that, you know, in terms of your scope of your study, it's pretty much wide open at the moment. You know, local providers teaming up with a foreign university, taking, you know, local students that have done a diploma or something, then they only do 1-year study and they, you know, they qualify for a degree from a foreign university. Look, you know, the whole field is so wide. Just, you know, define your boundary much more, more than you have done so far. You know, you're talking about undergraduate, education. Okay, maybe it's only in a particular discipline, right? Where foreign universities and local providers don't have to set up sophisticated laboratories and science labs or whatever else. You know, they only need a room in a second floor building to run classes, something like that. I've seen it happen, you know, elsewhere. So I think in terms of the scope of your study, narrow it down as much as you can to say you're only looking at undergraduate education in the discipline of business. Okay. And I again strongly believe that, you know, marketization and commercialization, a lot of state universities have moved to that direction as well. You know, we are a state university here in Melbourne, Monash University, many others. Like Monash, we do a huge amount of marketing and we provide to the masses. And it has become a commodity, you know, sort of, you know, system here. The other thing you could do is, you know, we have a regulated sector and we have a non-regulated sector. Maybe it would be interesting to do a comparative study. You know, take a sample of a regulated sector, sample of providers, and a sample of providers in the non-regulated sector. Then look at their, you know, policies and procedures and the contractual relationships that they have, you know, between the customer and the provider, if you like, and look at the differences between all of these things. And then you can say, well, you know, really, you know, the inputs are different or they are the same, but they're, you know, the outcomes are different. Okay. I think, you know, what we want to highlight here is that, you know, what is being done and how it is being done by these foreign, you know, providers and in partnership with local providers, that how and what is being done is inferior, which leads to poor quality outcomes. And that can be demonstrated in a comparative sort of way. So you can still do a qualitative study, narrow it down to say you're only looking at undergraduate studies in the business area, say, or any other area you like to select, and do a comparative study looking at how things are being done. What are the policies and procedures and the regulations, you know, around, you know, each group, the state and the non-state providers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Some further thoughts.
There is a comment on the chat on Zoom from Dr. Ravi Bamanusinghe. He's asking you, Janadari, I suppose this is something for you to think about once you really finalize what you want to do, your scope, and actual area of study. He's asking, are you intending to talk to employers and HR managers to compare performance of passed out students between state and non-state? So this is something like what Sohal was saying. Like if you do end up doing a comparative study, then I suppose this is what he's suggesting, that to talk to different stakeholders to sort of see the performance or quality from different perspectives.
Right,
Okay.
thank you. Okay.
If the panel is okay, thank you, Janadari. I hope you found the comments useful for you to fine-tune your proposal or your proposal, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
have our best wishes.
Yeah, good luck.
All the
luck.
best.
Thank you.
Next, let me call upon Ms. L.S. Casey Dahanayaka. Her title is Exploration and Exploitation of Knowledge Within Organization towards Knowledge-Based Economy, Investigation of Innovation Economics through a Policy Influence, Ambidexterity of the Public Research Institutions in Sri Lanka. That was a mouthful. Okay, over to you, Ms. Dahanayaka. Hello. Maybe they have lost connection. I don't see. Okay, PIM is there. Okay, there is some technical error, it seems. There is some technical issues. Sorry about that. Right, okay, back. They are back. You can start, please start.
Yeah, good afternoon and good evening for the panel members, and good afternoon for the audience. My title is Exploration and Exploitation of Knowledge Within Organization Towards Knowledge-Based Economy, Investigation of Innovation Economics through a Policy Influence, Ambidexterity of the Public Research Institutions in Sri Lanka. So when I started my background, innovation becomes an economic gain for any country when it introduced to the market as a commercial product. In few decades, new theory and narratives of economic growth grounded within innovation. In 1942, Joseph Champlin originated the innovation economics concept. It is then approach to economic growth through appropriate knowledge, technology, entrepreneurship, operating within a system of innovation at the institutional environment. So this innovation economics today, with the grounded of his origining, now it's today, this innovation economics is coming to use by most of the economics and the policymakers. So new economics model explain with this knowledge, technology, entrepreneurship and innovation are positioned at the center. Not it is focusing on individually, independently. Now all are coming at the central level. And also many countries focusing knowledge-based economy. Therefore, the innovation economics become more significant today itself. So with this background, my problem statement, I would like to focus initially from the global level. Therefore, I want to take a Global Innovation Index 2021 where industrial countries and developing countries are comparison, and industrial countries are global innovation index is high top level, but the developing countries are in the bottom level, because in the literature it shows industrial countries are successful in use of the commercialized technology for its economic development. So I wanted to show the difference between the industrial countries and developing countries, and the Sri Lanka developing countries. I want to take my problem statement contextualized in Sri Lankan situation, because when public research collaborates with industry, contributes to technical advances and innovation resulted. So my problem statement focusing towards the vision of science and technology and innovation strategy in Sri Lanka, where they wanted to have a vision in knowledge creation, leader in knowledge creation and innovation in Asia. But the overall research and development in Sri Lanka in contribution to the innovation is very low level. Although Sri Lanka's highest investment, which goes to 59% of the GDP, go to the research and development expenditure for the government sector. So based on that, as I explained, the exploration exploitation thing. So my theoretical gap I developed as, because very few researchers adopted on integration and synthesis of organizations' knowledge perspectives. Therefore, the knowledge-based view express on knowledge as a critical strategic resources. Because when compared with the resource-based theory, it mostly talk with the resources and ultimately go to the comparative advantage. But when you talk about the knowledge-based view, the theory shows the knowledge view is better explained in the resource-based theory, because exploration and exploitation of knowledge within the organization is better explained through the knowledge-based view. And also, but although it is better explained through knowledge-based view, less attention has been devoted how management can utilize these resources more effectively. On that theoretical background, I moved to the empirical gap, where we found universities and research institutions are the tool for the economic growth through the commercialization of university and research institution inventions. And there are, we found the literature, a lot of literature are found in the private sector innovation thing and less on the public sector. And also there is a less research found on the indirect complementary effects on the nexus between innovation activities and economic growth. And also there the sector-wise impact is very less found in the literature. So the most research contribute to the innovation capability measurements, and all these things led me to the problem statement, why the innovation economics are less in the public research institution in Sri Lanka. So therefore, my research questions are focusing on 4 areas. How does collaborative partnership facilitate innovation economics within the public research institution? And how does absorptive capacity facilitate exploration of knowledge within public research institution? And how does organizational ambidexterity support innovation economics? Does public policies moderate the organizational ambidexterity in achieving innovation economics? According to these research questions, I have formulated 4 objectives parallel to these research questions. These, according to these research questions and objectives, I have found in literature, most of the innovation characterized both as a process and as an outcome. Because of that, it's very easy for the public research institution analyze the public research institution exploration and exploitation thing, because the process and outcomes are characterized in innovation. And also the industrial countries are successful in use of commercialized technology within the economic thing. And also in the literature, it's found the absorptive capacity and the external knowledge. The exploration things are 2 concepts that can support for the innovation. So, and there is a very less research on the evaluation of public sector organization ambidexterity. So the concept of ambidextrous organization has not been explored thoroughly and still remains a very interesting topic for further research. And also I have highlighted absorptive capacity and ambidextrity throughout my literature thing. And based on this, my theoretical background mostly talk about the exploration and exploitation. So with that, I have used the knowledge-based view, and when found how it goes to the institution, I have used the organizational ambidexterity are the two theoretical bases of my concept. And this is the relevance of this both knowledge-based view and the ambidexterity theory, because knowledge-based view gives the better explain the exploration and exploitation of the knowledge within the organization, and ambidexterity theory gives the structural and contextual arrangement within the organization to move exploration and exploitation. So this is my conceptual model. Although I have identified it as a mediating and moderating things, I am still thinking about how to do it, the approach of doing it. So I have identified 4 propositions in my study that's indicated in here. And accordingly, I have identified these propositions. Then my theoretical implication goes, because the organization can build and manage organizational context that internally balance exploration and exploitation. Because structurally, organization can have exploration and exploitation structurally separated, having partnership, but in literature it shows neither structural nor contextual ambidextrous theory cannot explain how organization become ambidextrous. So I have given in the public policy come as a bridging within the ambidextrity model and show how the organization can efficiently put in the exploration to the innovation economy. So I have used the bridge. And my management implication of this concept is it improves the overall innovation process within the public research institution, and also it helps to direct management attention on maximization external knowledge, and also the government policy and regulation to support the structure and contextual arrangement within the organization. And also it supports the government-led industry levels solution, ultimately public-private partnership, and goes into the economy. And also the national innovation system, this can be contributed to the national innovation system of the country. And this my conceptual idea, originality and value I have identified as, because by theorizing knowledge-based view and organizational ambidexterity towards integration and synthesis of organizational knowledge perspectives. And also the public research institution manage knowledge effectively to promote innovation economics. And the last value I have indicated in my conceptual paper is develop a coherent conceptual framework to study phenomena of policy influence ambidexterity towards innovation economics within the public research institution. So this is my concept paper today I want to present, and I have taken the references that I have indicated here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will start with the comments from the panel. I will rotate from whom I ask first, so that I don't seem biased. So let me start with Professor Rooney. Would you like to give your comments? Yeah.
Thank you. Again, thank you for your work and a fascinating talk. It's a fascinating area and a very important one. So some of my questions around just understanding the linkages between the various concepts you're using. There's a lot of, if I can use this term, moving parts in this model. And I just want to try and understand a couple of them. So firstly, one of the issues around innovation economics has been the definition of innovation in the first place. Do you have a firm view on what you mean by innovation and to obviously for economic growth, but what concepts around innovation are you interested in?
Yes, sir, because the innovation economics, I have taken because still I have wanted to define it for my further for the improvement of this study. So basically, I have thought from the Global Innovation Index, there are 10 indicators given for the innovation things. So based on that, and also because when I go through the literature, it's very limited the number of research done for the innovation economic side. So I have to find out to define the innovation economics in a proper definition. Basically, the present one I have taken from the Joseph Schumpeter, who is originate this concept in 1942. That is the that is the appropriate knowledge, technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation. All are combined and going to the economic growth. That is the present definition I am using, sir.
So just to unpack that a little bit, so those early theories, innovation was seen as a linear process. So do you see, you're clearly using a process approach, yeah? So possibly evolutionary economics concepts as well, but do you see it as a linear process, or is this more like a systems of innovation that you're interested in?
So I think I'm interested in system of innovation, not the linear one, because this situation I am talking about in the conceptual model, it's not a more linear one. It's like a system-wise thing, because I am talking about collaborative partnership in Sri Lankan situation. I am talking about the public sector research institution. So when we come into the collaborative partnership, mostly coming for the private sector, coming for the public research institution. When the public research institution found any new ideas, the private sector also collaboratively come into the get together and work as a team and come to the. That's what I am thinking about right now, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So is the part of the proposition that most of the innovation comes from external to the institutions or organizations you're looking at?
No, sir, that we can't say, but innovation mostly coming from the outside knowledge and the absorptive capacity. Through that absorptive capacity, internal capacity can be improved, and by mixing that, only the innovation thing mostly happen according to my knowledge, not directly from the external knowledge. External knowledge also be a part of it, but for mixing of those two things is that's what I am going to find out, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so this does lead to the same questions as the previous speaker, but I don't want to monopolize the time either. Is this a quantitative study, a quantitative model, or a qualitative model that you're developing?
Yeah, sir, I think mostly this goes with the qualitative model, although I have put a mediating and all these things for my thing, I know, but I am more focusing on the case study things and all these things. So more qualitative type, or sometime it could be adding some quantitative data. So it could be most probably mixed method or something, but I am now more focusing on the qualitative side.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so there's some definitions there. So my last question, rather than monopolize all of this conversation. So I am keen to see where this notion of ambidextrous organization came from. What I see one of your slides, it talks about different forms of innovation. Is that the conflict you have in terms of an organization needing to achieve conflicting goals? And why focus on that? What's driving your need to understand how an organization is ambidextrous, and why is that a problem?
Yes, today I see the ambidexterity within the organization because there are structures and the processes and there are contextually, I mean, the processes and all these things within the organization, and the outside knowledge also coming. And we are still struggling whether those outside knowledge, that means the exploration and exploitation, having both equal strength within these ambidextrous organization. That is the national public organization today is having a problem. And also in that scenario, I am thinking about whether it could be the effect of the public policy that coming from the government that hindering the progress of this ambidextrous national organization. So I can't just now tell whether they are having ambidextrous nature. I am thinking according to this model, having ambidextrous organization, but in a real scenario, I wanted to check whether availability of the ambidextrosity within the government public research institutions, and what are the public policy is whether it's a pushing factor, how it's that control this situation. That I wanted to find out from here, sir.
Yeah. Okay. And we might have to come back to it. I'm just curious about what is it about public policy that causes that conflict in goals? But I should let the other panelists have the turn as well.
Thank you, Professor Rooney. Professor Sohal?
Yeah, thank you so much. Look, it's a very interesting area of study, worthy of examination at a PhD. But when I'm thinking about, an innovation system or a system of innovation, whatever you want to call it, or an innovation ecosystem, there I'm thinking about a number of key stakeholders involved. Yes, there is a public policy of some sort involved. There are some structures in place, and there's a specific context to describe that innovation ecosystem. Okay, and there are a number of players, a number of organizations within that innovation ecosystem. Now, I'm a little bit lost in terms of the collaborative partnerships that sort of leads to this innovation ecosystem. If you go to the next slide, which is the propositions slide, please, if you don't mind. So what I'm not quite clear is these collaborative partnerships that you're talking about. I would have thought that given an innovation ecosystem that is defined by a set of structures and policies and different types of organizations and other stakeholders, it's in that ecosystem that we want to establish our partnerships and take advantage of those partnerships to deliver some outcomes. Okay, so the way your model is presented, and obviously the propositions or hypotheses that you're presenting, I'm just a little bit confused by what is driving what to deliver outcomes. Is it within an innovation ecosystem that we want to examine the types of relationships that can be, partnerships that can be established and leveraged upon to deliver some outcomes? I'm just a little bit in my own head, I'm sort of a little bit confused by that. What I'm thinking about is, okay, we have a given innovation ecosystem, which is your public research institutes and the government and the policies and many other players involved. And in that context, okay, we want to understand how partnerships are developed and formed and managed and, sustained over time to deliver our innovation economy outcomes.
Yes,
that's
I think
about, your study or I'm trying to define it in my way. I'm just, yes, you can use those absorptive capacity theories and, ambidexterity to define what you're doing, but it's just a basic, groundwork or the defining the landscape within which you're doing your study. I don't have any issues with using absorptive capacity, because yes, you have to have that capacity to capture the knowledge, enhance the relationships and the partnerships and so on to deliver your outcomes. And I don't have any other issues with, talking about ambidexterity and so on. It's really starting with a defining the landscape, which is really our innovation ecosystem, which is defined by the structure, the players, the policies in place, and whatever else might be important. And then in that innovation ecosystem, in that context, we are wondering, well, okay, what sort of partnerships, do really work well? How do we manage them? How do we sustain them? Because, innovation takes a long time. Yeah, there's a time element here. And we have to, what is to be considered when we're looking at partners and building a partnership? How do we manage it, over time? That's what I sort of understand about what you perhaps are trying to do. But, again, I like some thoughts from you and the other panel members.
Yes, thank you, sir. I think you are quite right, because I now understood, because I have given this like a linear relationship like thing, but it's I think my study more going with the qualitative type, so that I can't exactly giving collaborative partnership, then this and this. Then I quite understand you. It's like a innovation system, like system thing. So it can't be a collaborative partnership. We have to have some kind of partnership, not one level, but it need to be have a more members involved. Yeah, I am well received your things.
Yeah,
And
I think you might be, your thinking is along the right line, but the way your conceptual model is presented is problematic for me.
yeah, I quite agree, because I have identified this as mediating and all these things. More go with the quantitative type. I am thinking about the qualitative, so I can't just have this model like thing. I have to fine tune it and you have more view of what I am in my mind. Yes, thank you, sir. I think I got your idea.
Thank you, Professor Sohal. Professor Chong.
Yeah, thank you. Again, congratulations for all the work that you have done until this point of time. I echo Professor Amrik and Professor Roni in their points. I just have 3 comments here. I echo Professor Amrik because I was trying to understand, and I'm still trying to understand what you want to do. And if we were to look at this conceptual model, that is my first concern. And if you were to refer to your proposed topic, your topic, the title of your research doesn't imply that collaborative partnership is your independent variable. If you look at the title carefully, it looks like your absorptive capacity is what you are focusing on in driving innovation economics. Right. So perhaps you may want to relook at this part again for clarity. And linked to this is I'm not too sure how ambitious or how over ambitious you are with your model. I do not know how what is your reach as far as your variables are concerned. I don't know how wide it will reach out to the extent that you may lose sight at one point. So you may want to redefine that again, looking into what you are trying to achieve from your research. And my third concern is, since you are talking about government policy or talking about public policy, how to actually look at the intervention from the policy side to enhance innovation in public research institutions. As you do so, it is also good to look at what demands change. What demands change in these organizations, in these public research institutions? Are they independent? Are they standing alone? Are they institutions owned by a larger public institution? If so, would there be more barriers that's stopping these public research institutions from being innovative? So that is also perhaps one part that you should be looking at as well, because there will definitely be adverse impacts when a subsidiary or when a smaller unit tries to do something which is not aligned to what the parents or the brothers and sisters are doing. So those are my comments at this point of time. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I also have a few comments in addition to what the three panelists have said. Now, you say you are going to do a qualitative research, then it's sort of okay. But if you end up doing a positivistic research, my main concern is the operationalization of what you mean by innovation economics. And also if you are going to look at innovation as a system or over time, you can't really then measure it as through a questionnaire at one point of time. So there are concerns about if you end up doing a positivistic study, some of your measures like public policy, innovation economics, how are you going to measure it? And also in your title, you are using the word exploration and exploitation. Where does that really fit in your research? Where does that, it's exploration and exploit, because they are two different things, right? Explore, or what do you really mean by that? So think of that as well. And again, like what I told the previous presenter as well, if it's a positivistic study, again, there is this issue of unit of analysis coming. Public policy, government policy is at the country level, but innovation that's happening is at research organization level. So those you need to keep those in mind. And finally, now, if you look at the title, just make sure the title, try to keep the title shorter than this and be clear. Now, if you look at the subtitle, Investigation of Innovation Economics through a policy influence ambidexterity. What does that really mean?
Because, madam, in my idea, I have there is an ambidexterity model already in the theory, ambidexterity theory. There is ambidexterity organization. So I have thinking that there are, because of the failing of this ambidexterity within the public research institution. So I thought of, is it because of the public policy? Whether
But then if you look at the model, it's a moderator. It's not a influencer or causality of your ambidexterity.
That is the thing, because I am trying to make it as a conceptual model. I want to have,
even if in your conceptual model, public policy is a moderator in that relationship. It's not directly influencing ambidexterity. So you need to make sure your title really reflects what you're planning to do. And it doesn't have to, your title doesn't have to tell all the variables that you're planning to study. It doesn't have to be in the variable, right? Make it simple. Like each time when I was reading, I'm like trying to figure out, okay, what this does. So make it simple. Just simple, have a title. But think of the title once you find, based on these valuable comments that the panelists have said, and once you have narrowed down, fine-tuned it, then think of a appropriate title that will reflect what you intend to do. All right. Let me open up. There are people who have logged in on Zoom, as well as there are people in the audience. If anybody would like to raise anything. Otherwise, I can do a second round of the panelists if there is anybody who would like to say anything. Professor Rooney, Professor Sohal, or Professor Chung, you want a second round of comments? You all are welcome to do. We still have about 10 minutes.
I agree with you that the title should be no more than 6-7 words. Simply an investigation into innovation economics in Sri Lanka. That's what you need. Then the rest is captured in as part of your objectives or whatever, and so keep it simple as far as the title goes. Start, when you start your presentation, you start talking about, as I say, I'm repeating what I said earlier, but start talking about the, sort of innovation ecosystem that Sri Lanka has currently. Who are the key players? What is the public policy? And what have been the major issues or problems in that respect? And that will help you then narrow down perhaps into looking at, collaborative partnerships. So it's initially describing the makeup of the, innovation system, ecosystem, talking about the issues and challenges for Sri Lanka in that context, and the importance of, partnerships and so on, which have obviously a key role in terms of the outcomes we want. So in my mind, you can tell the story, a little bit differently, perhaps in a much more interesting way, and let the collaborative partnerships variable come out of that initial discussion and so on as a major problem, if you like. That the right collaborative partnerships are not there, or they're not, they may be there, but they're not pursued well and not managed well and not sustained and so on, which leads to poor outcomes.
Professor Rooney or Professor Chong, or do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Not from me at this point of time. I think all the pertinent points have been addressed. Thank you.
Professor Rooney?
Yeah, likewise. I think it's
Okay.
a lot of the conversations is around a clearer problematization of what you're going to do. And if you do that, then I think it'll give you plenty of things to investigate.
Thank you. Anybody in the audience would like to say something or comment or ask clarification from the presenter? Anybody? You can unmute and speak or put something in the chat if you want any clarifications from the presenter. Okay, doesn't seem to be. So thank you very much. I hope you will consider the valuable constructive comments that the panelists have said. As pointed out, it's a good area. You just need to be very clear and focused on what you really want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. Good luck.
Good luck.
I'm muted. Okay. Next, I call upon Mr. D.L. Surya Mudalige to make his presentation on the effect of employee social capital, and organizational knowledge management capability on organizational performance during digital transformation and absorptive capacity view. Over to you, Mr. Surya Mudalige.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me well. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I think I'm audible to all. So my topic is effect of social capital and organizational knowledge management capability on organization performance during digital transformation. I'm based on absorptive capacity view. So first of all, digital transformation is actually a global phenomenon. So there are many definitions for digital transformation, but basically what it means is change in the organization, the whole organization rather, based on digital technologies. So digital transformation is actually multifaceted and multidimensional. It is impacting all the organizations throughout the organization. And it is actually, according to results, it has shown that it is actually yielding profits and revenue for the organization. So according to the literature, they are saying that digital transformation is not going to be what you call a luxury item. It will be actually what you call organizations are compelled to enter into digital transformation. And also maybe it will be a prerequisite for the organizations even to survive in the future. So when I look into this digital transformation, I found out that organizations spend on investment on technology, 40% of that is going for digital transformation. But actually about 21% of the organizations are actually going through the transformation. In the Sri Lankan context also, we find that many organizations are lagging behind the digital transformation journey. That means they are in the process, but they have not completed. So my question is, research problem is, although some organizations have not increased their organization performance, even though they have ventured into digital transformation. So I'm trying to identify what are the organization level factors which actually limit or inhibit organizations from achieving this, what you call good organization performance during digital transformation. When I look back into theory, I identified that when you consider the organization, digital transformation is actually an external knowledge. So I took the what you call the knowledge pathway to identify what is the what you call problem is. So external knowledge is a source of innovation. And from there, I took on absorptive capacity view, which actually identifies, which tries to identify how external knowledge is captured, and based on the existing knowledge of the organizations, how it can be put into a better use and better profitability in the organization. In that context, I identified that absorptive capacity view does not actually explain how the managers impact what you call this digital knowledge transfer, sorry, rather the knowledge transformation inside the organization. So that is the theoretical gap that I'm going to find out, which I'm explaining a little bit later. And also the empirical gap, organization is actually filled up with employees. So their social capital defined as what you call the resources that the organizations employees have with their internal networks is actually affecting the what you call absorptive capacity. But inside what you call the context of digital transformation, how the use of digital technologies can be used for actual knowledge transfer within the organization, within the employees during their informal relationships and so on. And that is actually not being explored fully. So that's the empirical gap that I'm trying to fill. In terms of research questions, I'm trying to identify, does management action impact knowledge transformation process in absorptive capacity of the organizations? Under which conditions it is actually happening? How digital technologies impact the knowledge transfer between the employees to their informal networks? And does absorptive capacity improve organization performance? So research objectives are aligned with this what you call research questions. Try to identify how managers can influence knowledge transformation within the organizations, which will actually find an answer for the research question that I'm putting forward. Try to identify conditions at which the managers can implement this one, and how to investigate how digital technologies impact knowledge transfer between employees rather. When I go back to the literature, organization performance is actually affected by many different variables. So knowledge is actually one of those variables. Actually, in the literature, there is a what you call a framework that is developed by Thies, which is actually called Profiting from Innovation Framework, which is trying to identify a similar question, which is trying to identify why organizations are going for the innovation, even though they are going for the innovations, why they are struggling. But actually, Thies' Profiting from Innovation Framework actually captures only the macro level factors. As I said, digital transformation is actually an organization-wide process. So digital transformation should actually encompass macro, meso, and micro levels of the organization. So this framework does not capture that information. So in the literature also, it is identifying that the technologies should be devised for innovation purposes within the organization that will yield for organization performance. And thus I have come to absorptive capacity view. So absorptive capacity view, which was developed by Cohen and Levital in 1990, it has gone through many different reconceptualizations in terms of different authors. So basically, it tries to identify how organization is getting the external knowledge, build it in with their existing knowledge, and try to make it use of a profiting or a profitable venture for the organization. Although there are many different conceptualizations, the components of absorptive capacity have not changed. So basically, acquisition of knowledge, assimilation of knowledge, transformation, and exploitation. So what I try to identify is what I understood using during the literature reviews was that all these components play a part in the development of absorptive capacity, but how managers actually balance these components is not explained in the literature. So that is also indicated in literature also, that gap. And also the management actions that can be built in to manage these components. Maybe some companies have high acquisition capacity, some companies have good transformation capacity, but lower levels of other components. So those kind of things, how management actions can implement balance those components is not captured. So that's the theoretical gap that I explained earlier to you. The second one, social capital of employees plays a pivotal role in the if you consider the knowledge as a practice perspective. So from the practice perspective of knowledge, we can identify knowledge being transferred among people. So in the digital transformation context, we don't know how digital technologies affect organization learning in this regard. So I'm trying to identify how digital technologies affect organization learning with regard to absorptive capacity. So these are the theoretical backgrounds that I'm using. So this is actually a brief identification of theories that I've used. I'm trying to use rather resource orchestration and actor network theory. I'm trying to incorporate in my model. Organizational learning, knowledge-based view, dynamic capabilities, and co-evolution theories have been actually referred to understand the context and the concept of absorptive capacity. In terms of conceptual model, this explains what I try to identify. So the organization performance is there. What I try to identify is how management action is actually affecting absorptive capacity. Like I said, how management action can balance those components of the absorptive capacity so that it will yield good organizational performance. And also I try to identify how social capital of employees affect absorptive capacity. It has been established that social capital will improve absorptive capacity, but how digital technologies moderate that relationship is also, it is not explained in the literature. And also in terms of absorptive capacity, how absorptive capacity mediates the impact of social capital on organization performance, and how management action, how absorptive capacity mediates management action on organization performance. I'm trying to identify in this model. So these are the propositions that I explained earlier. Management action has a positive effect on absorptive capacity in the organization. Digital technologies moderate the relationship between social capital and absorptive capacity. Social capital of employees has a positive effect on absorptive capacity. Likewise, I have included the two mediating propositions also according to the conceptual model. The theoretical contribution that I am going to put forward is that effect of digital technologies, how the digital technologies impact absorptive capacity. So the literature on digital technologies is actually still at its infancy. So they are actually trying to identify how these learning theories actually impact the digital technology, digital transformation. So it is also included. I have given a citation based on what I have read. And also, as I said, the underlying processes in absorptive capacity, the components of absorptive capacity, how the management actually can balance those components of absorptive capacity to yield good organization performance also. I'm trying to identify as a theoretical, as a contribution to the theory. In terms of managerial implications, as I said, many organizations are still stuck in the middle of doing the full digital transformation of the organizations. So I'm trying to identify how managers can manage the knowledge transfer. That is basically trying to identify how those balancing act of the knowledge absorptive capacity can be done, and also how to effectively use the digital technologies in the knowledge transfer. So those are the managerial implications that I try to fill in my study. Lastly, the originality of my study. As I said, the digital technologies are actually part and parcel of digital transformation. So how these digital technologies or the non-human factor is actually interfacing with the human factor is actually not discussed in the literature. So here I have included that there are no absorptive capacity papers that address knowledge absorption process in light of practice perspective. That is a practice perspective that I explained earlier, how social capital or the knowledge that is inbuilt between the relationships of the employees can be affected from the non-human element, that is the digital technologies, has not been explored. So that's another contribution that I am going to do with my study, in addition to the theoretical contributions that I explained earlier. That's about it.
Very much. So now I will start with first Chong. Over to you to start.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting proposal. I am still trying to understand, and perhaps you can enlighten me on your framework vis-a-vis the title that you are proposing for your research. You mentioned here that you are looking at how social capital and management action will lead to organizational performance, and in between, of course, there are moderating and mediating factors, right? You have the digital transformation and you have the absorptive capacity too. In your title, you seem to suggest that social capital and organizational knowledge management. I'm not too sure how that relates to your framework. How does it represent your framework as a whole? And what kind of impression that it is giving to your research? That is one part. The other part is that in your purpose, you made two very interesting remarks in your paper. You started off with a first statement to say that despite the fact that digital transformation is enabling higher organizational performance, many organizations still fail to reap benefits of digital transformation. That is accurate in a way that you have explained that to us just now, and it also makes sense to us, something that we see that is happening across many organizations across many countries. What is interesting here is that this was followed by the next statement. From literature, this can be viewed as a non-realization of the potential absorptive capacity. So you are suggesting that the effectiveness of absorptive capacity here could be a concern as to why organizations fail to reap the benefits of digital transformation. On the other, you also made the next statement in the same paragraph as well. You said that it is seen that absorptive capacity cannot explain why organizations succeed while some others fail during digital transformation. So perhaps you can enlighten me what these two statements meant in the context of your bigger agenda of your research. These are my two comments for the time being. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the questions. In terms of part one, my topic was how employee social capital is affecting organization performance during digital transformation. So that's why I've included social capital, how it is affecting organization performance. During digital transformation, I try to identify, because digital transformation is actually bringing in a lot of digital technologies. I'm trying to identify how these digital technologies have an impact of social capital and absorptive capacity, because I'm using absorptive capacity as the theoretical framework for my model. So in that case, I'm trying to identify how this social capital concept rather is actually affecting this absorptive capacity concept, because in the absorptive capacity view, it has already grounded that absorptive capacity is improving organization performance. So in that context, I'm trying to identify how employee social capital is affecting the relationship between employee social capital and organizational absorptive capacity is affected or moderated by digital technologies, because digital technologies are part and parcel of digital transformation. In terms of organization knowledge management capability, actually in this part, I have only considered management action only, because in the earlier context, I have organize for the to relate the knowledge management capability of the organization. In that context, I have used only management action. Maybe I can redefine it, but currently I am currently working on this concept only to reflect the knowledge management capability of the organization. In terms of part two, which explained. I think you are referring to the abstract that have been given.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here, sir, the absorptive capacity. As I said, there are many reconceptualizations. What I am using is this reconceptualization by Sohal and George in 2002, which is trying to identify, which is actually bundling these components into two parts. That means acquisition and assimilation is coming under potential absorptive capacity, whereas transformation and exploitation is coming under realized absorptive capacity. So in this reconceptualization also by Sohal and George, it is trying to identify how this potential absorptive capacity is transferred to realized absorptive capacity. So in this context, also I'm trying to identify rather in absorptive capacity in all those reconceptualizations. It doesn't explain how these components are interrelated. There are many different mechanisms they try to identify. They try to identify these components as a process, and they try to identify these as a capability of the organization. But and also in different reconceptualization, they are trying to identify different antecedents also for this concept. But the thing is, how these components are balanced is not explained in the literature as such. So as you said, in the abstract also, I have mentioned that potential absorptive capacity translating into realized absorptive capacity is not explained. How it is going to how it is actually going to be explained, how it is transferred is not explained. Actually, Sohal and George actually indicate that only social interactions are needed for the translation of these two components into this realized absorptive capacity, and also some this Dustrin and these two authors have included power element also, how these two translate, but in literature only these two components are actually identified as how this transfer is actually happening. But in all these reconceptualizations, how the management is actually balancing out these components of the absorptive capacity is missing. So that's why I'm trying to identify that as a theoretical gap in my study.
Yeah, thank you.
Sohal?
Thank you very much. Certainly a hot topic at the moment, given all types of organizations in all types of industries are rapidly transforming to become digital organizations. But looking at your framework, conceptual model, and I think you made a statement somewhere that digital transformation is happening at all the different levels. That in terms of the impact of being digital, you're only examining the relationships, if you like, between social capital and the absorptive capacity of the organization, when much of the work done by managers and the actions and the decisions they make is now done digitally. And you don't seem to take any account of what managers do, how they do their work, the decisions they make, all done digitally now. And that impacts on the absorptive capacity of the organization. And you don't seem to be examining that. I think the whole study was to do with digital transformation and how organizations work these days, not just their social capital, but everything that is done. So I would have thought, an examination of, first of all, the level or the degree of digitization that has taken place within organizations, the type of work that is being done through digitization, and hence the knowledge base that they create now, which is your absorptive capacity measure, if you like, and then how that impacts on performance. I'm just a little bit confused that, unless I fail to understand what social capital means, but it doesn't, the management actions there sits all on its own, saying to me that digitization doesn't have any impact on management action. That's my first really concern.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I have not included the moderating effect of digital technologies on management action. I think that is what you are implying, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That should be the heart of the thesis examination. How are organizations as a whole, what they do, how they do things, the way managers work together and the decisions they make. Now everything is digital. I would have thought you want to examine whatever theoretical framework you use, that's fine, one or another type, but it's, what is the current level of digitization? How is the job of managers changing? How are the decisions changing? Hence, to make them better in terms of what they do and perform better.
Okay.
Right? Logical thinking, just simplistic thinking in my head is, I want to examine what is the current status in Sri Lanka of different types of organizations in terms of their digitization journey. Where are they? What is their level of digitization? How are they making their, how are they performing their work? And can include, if we are talking about a factory, the level of automation using, artificial intelligence and also, intelligent robotics, or the decisions that managers make. And the aim is, through use of all of those technologies being digital, improves, because you have all of these technologies to rely on now, that improves your capability or your capacity. Okay, you have a much bigger knowledge base, and hence you can argue that the organization will improve, better than when it doesn't have digitization. And of course, the social capital that individuals have, is all part of that. With the digitization, your social capital can be enhanced. Your managerial actions can be enhanced. So similar to my comments for the other two, presentations made, is that, digitization is the context, if you like. We want to look at, organizations that are transforming through digitization. They're on their journey. They may be they may be at different levels or stages of, moving towards full digitization. And in that sort of context, then we want to say, well, in that context, does it enhance their social capital? Does it improve their managerial actions and all the other work that is done in an organization, which gives them a much better knowledge base? It enhances their. Then you can use that theoretical framework, absorptive capacity, to sort of measure that in a sense. Okay, and hence leading to better outcomes in terms of organizational performance, however you measure it, financial performance, operational performance, or something else. You've got to be more specific as well in terms of the type of performance you want to measure. So that's how I sort of try and understand what can be done by using the theoretical frameworks of AC and so on in the context of a whole country that is being digitized, okay, where relationships or our social capital is now being carried out and managed through digital means. Managers from one company don't fly 10,000 miles to go and meet another manager, okay, to do a deal. It's done, virtually, using all sorts of platforms, Zoom and Teams. Management actions, I'm not quite sure what enough hasn't been said about management actions. What are we really talking about? What management actions are we talking about here? Look, there are some of my comments. I'm still not fully clear exactly, whether this is the right sort of conceptual model at this point in time. Perhaps needs a bit more thinking.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your comments. Actually, my main target was to identify how these components of absorptive capacity is affected by management action, and rightly said by you, these actions can be impacted or moderated by digital technologies. So I'll take that into consideration also in future. Because my primary concern was actually trying to identify how management actions are actually impacting what you call the balancing of the components of absorptive capacity.
Can you talk a little bit about the management actions that you're referring to? I'm not quite clear on the management actions you're referring to.
So what I mean by management action is that now managers currently, this is actually still in the conceptual model. I have not actually related that into a variable as such. Management action, what I am trying to identify is that how middle-level managers can actually, their actions that can be taken for the knowledge transfer between the within the organizations. Maybe trainings, maybe knowledge enhancement programs, maybe introduction of new technologies, pilot projects. Likewise, those kind of actions, middle-level managers' actions are actually considered inside this managerial action concept.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it there for time being. Thank you.
Okay.
Rooney, yeah. Professor Rooney, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, echoing the thoughts of Professor Chong and Professor Sohal. Interesting topic, fascinating topic, and very valuable one. I'm just going to add to the comments that they've made because I do agree with them. I do have the same problem with management action. So where does it fit theoretically? So are you talking about capabilities? Is that what you're focused on? And having a clearer definition of what, I guess, influences in terms of what management do that interact with absorbent capacity. But you already know that you just need to give some more thought about exactly what aspects you're looking at. Similar commentary about social capital. You partly answered my question. I was curious as to the justification for focusing on social capital, and some of it's basically driven out of the literature, but there is also literature in absorptive capital capacity literature that talks about the importance of relational capital as well, and also structure. So what I'd encourage you to do is to give some more thought to why you're focusing on one aspect, one type of capital. And then beyond that, because the literature does cover some of that, beyond that, to be maybe a little bit clearer on, are you interested in the processes and the flow, or are you interested in the stock, like various capitals and their impact and their interaction with absorptive capacity? I don't think there's a lot more work you need to do. I think it just is a case of being a little bit clearer about what aspect of those concepts you're interested in and how you employ them. I do agree again with the is digital technologies a context, or is it a player in this model? If it's a player, what perspective are you looking at it? Is it the ability to develop additional capabilities? Is it an interaction in terms of stock of knowledge? What exactly is it that that you're interested in terms of the role of digital technologies? And I think if you can think about that a little bit more, you'll also provide some more focus to your study. I guess that's, there's one other sort of very specific point. Somewhere in the presentation, it talks about foundations of absorptive capacity. And so you partly answered that question. So I was wondering what you meant by that. You partly answered it by highlighting the difference between potential and realized absorptive capacity. But the question I really have is when you talk about foundations, are you talking about the potential, or are you talking about the realized, or are you talking about a combination of both? So again, I'd sort of encourage you to use the concepts to help clarify the phenomenon you're interested in. And I guess I'll leave it at that, because they're really commentary that builds on what the other professors have said already.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your comments. Actually, sir, this social capital, actually, as you correctly said, there are 3 dimensions: cognitive, relational, and structural. So I am trying to identify how these dimensions inside this concept. I'm trying to analyze those dimensions as well. And also, digital technologies is actually what you call is actually only a concept, because digital transformation is the context. Inside what do you call, if you refer digital transformation literature, they are talking about different concepts. So digital technologies is one, digital innovation, digital entrepreneurship. Likewise, there are different concepts that are coming up in the digital transformation literature. So I have considered only digital technologies as, and to answer one of their questions, I'm trying to identify how digital technologies is affecting this knowledge building process. As I said, social capital, via social capital, I am trying to identify knowledge as a practice perspective, where knowledge is in practice perspective, where they are trying to identify knowledge is not actually a cognitive thing, but actually it is evolving through the practices. So I'm trying to identify how these digital technologies impact, how actually it moderates the practice perspective, how digital technologies impact the evolution of the knowledge between the employees in practice perspective. In terms of management action, this absorptive capacity, as I said, these components, they are actually in the in the literature, they are trying to identify as these rather cognitive processes. So in this management action, I'm trying to identify knowledge as a property, or as you said, knowledge stock perspective. So I'm trying to identify both knowledge perspective in my study. As you rightly said, I'll try to identify more on management action. As I said, in the literature also, they are talking about management capabilities, and also some literature is trying to identify cognition capabilities of management as well. But I have actually separated it from there, because cognitive process are actually more towards higher management. So in terms of middle management, I'm trying to identify management action or management capability. So I'll try to refine my concept based on your comments to identify whether it should be management action or management capability. Thank you.
Yeah, and just again reinforcing about different types of capital, there is literature on absorptive capacity that says that relationship capital is by far more important than any other form of capital. But there are, as you said, there's conflicting results. So in this space, you do have to justify why you're focusing on one or the other. Or, as you say, if you're looking at how they interact, then it's better to be clear that that's what you're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I won't repeat what the panelists have already said, but I have a few concerns or points that you can think about. One is now whether it's going to be positivistic research or, let's say, qualitative. I assume most of your sort of organizations or cases where digital transformation has happened is going to be that have already gone through. So your data collection, what people's perspective is going to be retrospective, right?
Yes.
Right. It's not something you're not going to. Are you planning to study organizations that are going through the transformation, digital transformation?
Actually, madam, I'm trying to identify, like you said, the organizations that have that are mostly completed digital transformation.
Okay, because one of my concern is depending on when they went through the transformation process, maybe their recollection about, because even though you are making out absorptive capacity as an organizational level variable about organizations, isn't it a summation of the individual's capacity that becomes the organization's capacity, right? So I'm just thinking in terms of their reflective, retrospective memory recollection of how, whether the technology helped them or whatever the relationship, and that's something that you might want to consider, think about. And also, I also feel because organizational absorptive capacity, all that is at company level, I would assume there will be different capacity levels of people in different levels of the organization. Even in management, the lower level, executive level, So does it, maybe I'm asking the panel also, does it really make sense to like put all the, ask this question from all the employees and put it together? There will be a lot of variance in terms of the differently educated level people, the different level of people and their use of technology also. What level of people are really using this digital transformation, this outcome for their work? So it will really make sense you focus on the level of people that are mostly using. Let's say if you look at the banks, Sri Lankan banks have gone through digitization, they are still going through. So if you are really going to study, no point, maybe the decision makers would be the TMT level, but the users would be mainly middle and lower level. So, or maybe the frontline people. So study only them and look at their absorptive capacity. So there are these finer issues that you need to really think of, like that was pointed out in terms of management action. Management action, the word is so broad. Everything that they do is management action. So what are you really going to focus on when you use the word management action? Even the word organizational performance is so broad. Are you looking at the market share? Are you looking at if it's banks, what is their market share? Right? Or is it profitability, profit after tax, is achievement of their KPIs? Right? So every word you have used here is very broad, right? So I would say you need to really be clear what exactly you mean, and in future start using that as your variable name, because that will then help us and help you to really start making sense of what you want to study, right? When you say organizational performance, is it profit? Is it market share? Is it number one position or market penetration? How much you have gained since you did digital transformation? So be very specific, whether it's management action, absorptive capacity, whatever. I would say start really reflecting and be clear what you really wanted, and that will help you with your conceptualization. So I will stop with that. Yeah. Would anybody would like to add something?
I agree with you wholeheartedly that really need to focus and narrow on what we're looking at, and even the types of technologies, digital technologies. There are a whole bunch of technologies out there. Are we looking at certain types of technologies that only relates to building, social relationships, communication technologies? Or is it some technologies that we want to look at that help you do your work, okay, when you're doing your work? So I think, time spent now on thinking about all of these variables and really narrowing down as much as you can will be very, very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Anybody in the audience or who have joined over Zoom, any comments or clarifications or helpful comments for him to think of or sharing of your experience in this? I don't see any hands raised or. All right, I don't see any hands raised either. So thank you very much. Would you like, we have a few minutes allocated to you in your time. Any clarification? Would you want to ask anything from the panelists? Any more clarification on what they said?
Actually, all the comments, thank you for your comments. Those are very constructive comments that I received. One thing that I would like to know is that whether I should include innovation concept within this conceptual model, because digital transformation is happening, and as I said, in the literature, they are trying to identify there are different concepts like digital technologies, digital entrepreneurship, digital innovation. So I was wondering whether there should be a mediating variable between absorptive capacity and organizational performance, like digital innovation. But I have not.
What you can think about is you're talking about absorptive capacity and the 4 items that you looked at. What you can focus on, capacity to do what? Be more innovative, perhaps, or something else. So it's there. I think you just need to think a little bit more deeply about what you're trying to do. Specific management actions, maybe relating to innovation, and then you're building your capacity to do something, and that can be being more innovative. Okay, and then your performance outcome is easily measured by number of new products developed. Okay, or time to market as a measure. Okay, you really need to focus on what is it that you want to look at in these organizations that they do to become more competitive, okay, in a very competitive marketplace, and how the digital technologies help you to build your social capital and help you to do the work that you need to do to be more innovative, perhaps. Okay, so it could be in the context of being more innovative, and then you got your performance measures. Okay, time to market, number of products put out each year, 1 or 2 others. Look at the innovation literature, new product development literature, you got your performance measures. Narrow it down, as already said by our chair. Studies are great, the broad topics are fantastic. You just need to, focus on what is it that we want to look at, capacity of what? Absorptive capacity relating to new product development. Then your performance measures are, out there already given. They don't have to, you don't have to look for them. They're very well defined. So the story you can tell is, if we got a few minutes, Professor, the story you want to tell it, I want to look at Sri Lankan businesses and see how innovative they are, and how that innovation process, if you like, is facilitated by digital technologies with respect to the social capital that needs to be in place and all the work that managers and the organization needs to do. So if you were telling your grandmother, what research am I doing? Well, I'm looking at Sri Lankan businesses. This is what you say. I'm looking at Sri Lankan businesses to see how how competitive they are becoming by improving their innovation, perhaps by applying new digital technologies, building better social capital and better management practices. Okay, that's what I would say to my old grandmother.
Understood, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to add, or we can move on to the next presentation?
Okay.
Can't hear you. I think you're muted, Prashant.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Professor. I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all the pertinent points have been highlighted by my very learned panelists here. It is very important to rethink in the context of Sri Lanka what is needed out there, and by doing so, what do we aim to achieve at the end of the day? So I think it is good to think from that perspective, and on that basis, think of how practical, how realistic it is for your research to cover the different aspects that you have highlighted here. And one of the biggest challenge that we always encounter is the fact that we do not know where to draw a line. I think that is a challenge. And when I was doing my PhD, I had the same issue too. So it is always good to talk to your supervisor, talk to some. I'm sure there are many very good colleagues, very good academic colleagues at the PIM. So talk to people. Try to get different perspectives on what constitute a framework that is large enough, something that you can use as a basis for you to advance your research. So that I think would serve you well. It can be difficult for us to tell you to give you a very definite response on what is considered good enough, what is considered not sufficient, and so on. You will have to talk to different people, but at the same time bear in mind that your research questions, your research objectives will be what that will determine the parameters of your research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much. Thanks.
A pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you. All the best. So the final presentation is by Ms. Petni Omalka de Silva, and her title is A Bird's Eye View of Group Delinquent Psychology and Behavior, Shifting the Paradigm of Forensic Accounting Perspective of Financial Frauds. Over to you, Ms. de Silva.
In year 2000, assumed yourself as a middle-income earner in Sri Lanka and searching for an investment opportunity to invest in, and found this well-renowned company and invested there expecting higher return. But later, 3 months later, you heard the news. The Saksati Holding PLC in Sri Lanka caught red-handed with 1,060 million worth financial scam. Good evening to everyone. With that note, I would like to unveil my topic for today, a bird's eye view of group delinquent psychology and behavior, shifting the paradigm of forensic accounting perspective of financial fraud. I'm Petni de Silva. Financial fraud can take many forms. It can be either money theft, asset misappropriation, information misuse or omission, financial misstatement, falsified acquisition, money laundering, and bribery. What I want to emphasize here is fraud, financial fraud. It's an intentional manipulation and it causes deliberate action. It's an activity carried out by one or more person to earn illicit gain. According to the Association of Chartered Fraud Examiners, they have identified the number of cases reported relating to the financial fraud are low, but the damage it causes is significantly high. If financial professionals are involved in, it causes significant damage. And according to the Deloitte 2007, averagely takes 4.7 years to uncover financial fraud. You all have heard this corporate giants' failures. Enron, WorldCom, Lehman Brothers, they have failed due to a number of financial fraud, including inflating revenue, off-balance sheet transactions, and colluding with the auditors. I can provide an abundance of evidence from local context. Sri Lanka Accounting and Auditing Monetary Standard Board reported in 2020, Touchwood PLC, Kalpitiya Resort PLC, and Central Finance PLC have accused for financial fraud. You can see all these financial fraud cases are taken in the form of collusion. Auditors, accountants, directors knowingly facilitated this fraud. Extension to this study conducted by Association of Chartered Fraud Examiners in 2018, they have identified if multiple perpetrators are involved in the fraud, it causes a damage 2 to 3 times greater than single perpetrator involvement. Accordingly, I would like to depict my problem statement. The financial fraud has caused severe going concern issues in the companies. In spite of number of fraud prevention and detection tools introduced, and in spite of the pressure imposed on the corporates to behave ethically, still these frauds are evolving, continuing. Therefore, it prompts a thorough reconsideration on the subject matter. Accordingly, I would like to establish my performance gap. It necessitates a new approach to examine the fraud. As pledged in my study, viewing from bird eye perspective, the group delinquent psychology and behavior. Again, the psychology and behavior, because the fraud is a intentional manipulation and it causes deliberate action. Theoretical gap. In the fraud literature, fraud triangle theory stood as the mainstay theory for decades. It has been evolved to fraud diamond, fraud pentagon, and fraud hexagon. But still, these canons have highlighted only about solo delinquent behavior. These studies reflect, therefore, the advancement of the fraud reflect to search beyond fraud triangle, diamond, and pentagon. It says, Lockdown 2015 commented that fraud is a multifaceted phenomenon. It cannot be fixed into specific context. Therefore, it needs to assimilate the theories from criminology, psychology, and sociology. When it's come to fraud literature, Timblin and Ingard, Richardson, and Beasley, they have conducted empirical analysis on fraud collusion. And these cases, Enron, WorldCom, Lehman Brothers, Adelphia, Tyco, these cases have been analyzed. But the literature is limited in the scope of identifying group mindset and behavior. Therefore, I am going to address 2 phases in my study. Firstly, I want to identify how these psycho-behavioral elements involved in committing a fraudulent activity as a group, and how these factors can be integrated into the forensic accounting framework. Accordingly, I have 3 research questions to understand psycho-behavioral elements' impact on forming collusive group, and how these elements would impact on continuing as a collusive group. Finally, such comprehension to build a contemporary forensic accounting framework. Accordingly, I have aligned my research objectives. If I move to the literature review, the collusion, deceit, full arrangement, or secret cooperation between individuals to earn illicit gain. Fraud collusion, professional connections, their narcissistic behavior, their accessibility to the inside information, the power vested with them are ingrained in financial accounting fraud. Therefore, I would like to see it as a tripart agreement between collusive leader, destructive leader, vulnerable supporters, and conducive environment. Accordingly, I would like to develop my model. As the prelude to my model, The formation of collusive group is studied using the power or the strength between the individuals, immediacy, physical and psychological closeness, mutual support, how they share information, and group dynamics. There are differences. And then how they continue as a collusive group norms and adherence, what they are fit into, group identity, the image that they have created, and group cohesiveness, task and role commitment. The forensic framework. If we go to the forensic framework, again, it's a tripart arrangement. It considers investigative skills with accounting and auditing skills. But still, it's again focused on solo offenders. There, Van and the others 2015 revealed that this assumption, one size fits all model is it's naive model to assume. Therefore, Rasi 2005 commented, he suggested a gamemanship review that comprehensively assess management team attitude, philosophy, beliefs, decisions, and management styles, actions, ethical value in the context of fraud. Accordingly, to the relating to the game model, I am going to study dependability, transferability, and confirmability. The dependability means how well they are dependent on each other. Here, the fraudsters and investigators. Transferability, how well they are transferring information between each other. And confirmability, how we can confirm the evidence we have gathered. Here, I am going to intermingle two theories: dynamic social impact theory, which considered attitude and behavioral change occurs due to positive and negative stimuli. Then the group dynamic theory, which explains the group dynamic cause behavioral and psychological change. And behavioral game theory, which considered as the mainstay theory in fraud identification, which considered fraud identification as a game between fraudsters and investigators. This is the model. First, I want to study how they form fraudulent group, then how they continue as a fraudulent group, finally, how we should unveil this fraudulent activity. Accordingly, I have developed my propositions. Theoretical implication. The fraud theories that I have that has been utilized in the studies, the fraud triangle theory and pentagon and hexagon, they are silent about group dynamic behavior and group psychology. Therefore, I am going to establish a model that will analyze how individuals form group and continue the group to form a collusive act. Therefore, understanding on such cohesive behavioral pattern and psychological pattern will assist in developing a framework to identify fraud. Managerial implication. The study will develop a model that assists in understanding a collusive mindset and behavior, which subsequently result in implementing a robust fraud identification policy. Originality. When it's come to the originality, in Sri Lankan context and in the global context, there's no robust framework to understand fraudsters' psychology and behavior in financial fraud domain. Therefore, such understanding will helpful in combating fraud at their existence. Therefore, it will bridge the gap between fraud and fraud identification. Accordingly, I would like to say, if you have seen a fraud and stay silent, you are the fraud. Thank you.
Very much. So I will start with Professor Sohal now.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had the camera off and microphone off. Took me a few seconds to turn them on. Well, look, thank you very much for your presentation. Again, the world that we live in and all the fraudulent activities and so on, on the increase. So it's a timely study, I must say. And if you don't mind going back to your model, your framework, that would be valuable for us to think about, what you're doing here. Again, I think the subject matter, what you're looking at is not my area of expertise, but what I would really like to ask is, how are you going to actually operationalize what you're trying to do here? What is the context of the study going to be? How are you going to measure these different variables and so on? And it's a very touchy subject, very sensitive subject. Where are you going to get your data? Who are you going to interview? And so on. They are the questions that come to mind. It's an interesting study. I'm sure it'll lead to some very interesting findings, very helpful for many parties, but it's going to be problematic, I feel, getting the data that you need and how you're going to get that data.
Actually, there are so many cases that have been revealed to public, which are functioning at the courts in Sri Lanka, and there are bodies like Sri Lanka Accounting and Auditing Standard Monitoring Board, and we have at the Stock Exchange watching list, and then we have the Central Bank Financial Intelligence Unit. There are a number of cases that have been reported at these institutes. Therefore, firstly, I'm going to start my study from the cases that have been revealed to public at large. As example, as I started with Sakwiti Holding case and then Touchwood PLC, all these Sri Lankan cases have been filed at court. Therefore, first of all, I would like to go through these court cases and to gain an understanding. Thereafter, I would like to develop a semi-structured interviews with the fraudsters who have involved in these fraudulent activities. Then to develop the framework after gathering evidence relating to the initiation and continuation, after presenting it, after mapping all these things, I would like to contact forensic accountants to gain their understanding about the collusion. It's 3 phases. First, I'm doing document analysis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, your phase 1 is fine, looking at these various bodies and gathering data from all of the reported cases. That is fine to get some initial insights. And your second phase, you're saying, is actually, interviewing people that have committed the crime, sort of thing. I think that will be quite difficult to do. People opening up to you and owning up to their poor behaviors. The third phase you're talking about is the auditors, people who have done the investigations on behalf of some of these accounting bodies. I think if you do the first phase, which is some sort of an analysis of as many cases as you possibly can within a certain boundary, if you like, and then interviews, followed by interviews with the auditors, and capture the auditors' perspectives, because they hopefully are people with high ethics and so on, and they are the ones who are doing the right job, without themselves being fraudulent in any way. I think if you do those 2 phases without the need to interview the actual culprits, that might be sufficient for your PhD. So my suggestion would be, yes, do your initial analysis of secondary data, which is compiling a list of, cases reported in a certain field or area and doing some analysis of that sort of data. Then interviews with the auditors who are responsible for collecting, the data with respect to these cases. And I suggest based on that, you develop your framework or model of some sort. And your third phase then should be that you take your developed model or framework to a couple of focus groups and say, hey, I understand this problem now. I've interviewed these auditors and so on. They'd be more happy to talk to you rather than the people who've been accused of fraudulent behavior. And then in this third phase, focus groups, couple of them, you say, well, this is what I've done. This is what I have developed in a, as a framework to, eliminate this type of fraudulent behavior. What does it mean to you, my framework? Does it have utility? Does it make sense? Blah, blah, blah. That, that way, I think you'll develop a good study. The three phases that I've described, addressing, some of these concerns that you've raised. So yes, it's an interesting study, and I think it'll lead to some good outcomes and papers. Thank you.
Sorry, me? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, I'd have to echo those thoughts from Professor Sohal. It's a fascinating study and it's well needed. And there's definitely a gap in the literature in terms of group dynamics with fraud. So good for you to do that. One of my questions is around justification for the theoretical frameworks that you're using. So I can see why you use psychology, but given that fraud in many aspects of fraud research have been around in the criminology literature, was there any group psychology, social psychology theories you looked at that come from the criminology literature, and were there any particular reasons why they weren't applicable to this study?
So there's no like social impact theory and group dynamic theory. They are coming from group behavioral theories, and the behavioral game theory, the fraud detection, it's a part of criminal theories. I have identified from the criminology studies. They have used the behavioral game theory concept, but it's not empirically investigated.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not, maybe I'll rephrase the question. It's not my area of expertise either, but it is a former colleague of mine, a guy named Professor Clinton Free. And so he identifies about 4 or 5 different areas of criminology theory that looks at group psychology. So, so one of them is social exchange theory. And he talks about others like group influence perspectives. There's a list of them. And I'm just curious as to whether any of, and they're different theories from the ones you're looking at. There's some psychoanalytical theories as well that operate in a group sense, even though that's normally an individual psychology. So I'm wondering if when you were looking at your literature review, whether any of those applied, because this colleague thinks that they might. Now, the paper I'm looking at specifically in front of me is from 2015, and there's been more work since then. But I'm just wondering as a general thing, because you will get asked by an examiner for more specific justification for the theories you use. And I'm not saying that they're not the right theories. I'm just curious about that perspective.
Professor Rooney, can I jump in here?
Sure.
Looking at this slide, I'm thinking maybe you're trying to use too many theories here. 1 or 2 too many.
Could be.
With the behavioral game theory, I'm reading mainstay theory to fraud identification. We are not in that, you're not looking at identifying frauds. They've already been identified. they've been listed, right? Somebody's already done the work. The auditors or whoever, you're going to look at those cases that have been identified as fraud. So you don't have to do that. Being in a business school, in a management school, what you really can only focus on, I believe, is, okay, here are all the fraud cases, and it involves some groups. What have been the group dynamics there? What were they? What was driving them? How did they behave? Blah blah blah. In that context, I think if we just focus on that, that is worthy of a PhD investigation. I strongly feel that you're just trying to do too much here. Okay, maybe 2 PhDs at the same time. You don't need to do that. Be much more focused and do a thorough investigation, looking at the group dynamics, and get some insights into how these groups that do naughty things, how do they behave, and what can be done to change their behaviors. Sorry to interrupt you, Professor Rooney. I just feel that, in this case, you're trying to probably do too much.
No, they're related questions. Being very clear about what you're looking at, what the problem is, and why you're using a particular theory to investigate it. Yeah, that's all I had specifically.
Thank you. Professor Chong, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I joined Professor Amrik and Professor Rooney in congratulating you. I think this is a very, very interesting research. Personally, I would love to know the results of your research. I would love to learn. What will you identify? What will you find out from this research? Especially exactly what you have put in your proposal. You wanted to understand collusive mindset and behavior so that you can identify, you can establish a solid fraud deterrence framework. That is, of course, a bit ambitious, a bit realistic, but it is definitely something that I believe the world is looking at, especially fraudbusters. You'll definitely love to look at your framework. So again, coming back to your objective, coming back to your implication. So this is where you need to work backwards in a way that now that you have your framework and you have the list of theories that you want to focus on. Of course, I do agree with Prof. Amrik and Prof. Rooney that you are a bit ambitious, but again, look at your managerial implications again. Look at what you want to find out at the end of your study. Yes, as of now, it is a bit ambitious, but you need to think of whether is that what you want to come up with. Something that when a fraudbuster who upon looking at your research will be able to determine what is a fraudster's mindset be. What is a behavior of a group that will show that this group has the potential to do naughty things. That is what you put in your proposal. So you will have to re-examine that again to look at, is that what you really want to look at, what you really want to focus on and achieve, and therefore that will have implications on how are you going to collect data. Right? I'm in total agreement with Prof. Amrik because your research is highly sensitive in nature, very sensitive. It will even endanger you at one point, as you uncover a number of things. So you will have to approach this topic very, very carefully. Talk to the fraudbusters than talking to the criminals. Right? Of course, it is always good to talk to the criminals, but if that is not feasible, that is where you will need to identify a different way of getting data. And I'm in agreement with those focus groups, because again, what we refer to in the form of secondary data may not form the interpretation that is actually the case. So this is where the focus group will tell you a lot of things. The theories may also direct you to some of the conclusions that you are going to make later. So again, you have our best wishes, and I'm sure not only me, all of us cannot wait to listen to you. What would the findings be? Thank you.
Thank you very much. One thing I would like to add is that since this is for all of you, this is the quite early stage of you're still in the conceptualization process, so y'all haven't really thought of your methodology yet. But just a warning, or not warning, but something for you to think about. In case you do go in the track of positivistic research, when you showed your conceptual model, or I just felt for you to really have a nuanced understanding of why people behave in such way, rather than having 9 independent variables, it's always good to think of, these boundary spanning conditions and whether there is a mediator because there is always in the middle, there is this black box sort of thing with mediators and moderators that lead to such behaviors. So if you do go in that pathway of positivistic research, I would encourage you to think of not just independent variables and have so many independent variables, but to think of under what conditions, sort of those answers as well as possible variables. Right. With that, let's see, at least for you, if there are anybody from the participants or anybody would like to share their comments or thoughts with you all. Anybody from the Zoom participants or who are there in person? Anybody would like to raise anything?
Professor, I think one
Yes,
of the
Surani.
most challenging things would be the collection of data, the types of areas that she mentioned, because I've been in the financial sector myself. I mean, those are very confidential. And getting anything from central bank would be like getting water out of a rock. And she might run into difficulties in that aspect. So though it sounded like, even the stock market, okay, there are published data, but there are the cases of what has been found, unless it's a legal court case or something, then of course you can get information from the courts. But in addition to that, these institutions, whether they would give any information is very questionable. And I would feel sorry that if she is unable to proceed with not being able to get the right information to conduct a study. So that's my concern.
Yes, that's also something the panel also raised in terms of, so it will all end up once she, I suppose in the conceptualization also, she would have to think of whom she wants to study or from where she will be able to get what type of data. Because if she really wants to interview the people who did the fraud, how much honest or they will talk about their motives or the behavior, the psychology of it, we don't know. So as pointed out by the panelists, if she's going to talk to the auditors or whatever, then it's sort of their opinion about why these people behave in such a way, right? So then you have to fine tune your model and the names of the variable to fit that conceptualization. Yes. There is, all right, okay. Yeah. Any questions? Do you want to ask any clarifications from the panelists or answer any of their queries or questions?
Thank you very much for everyone for your insightful comments, and I will relook into my model and I will refine it. And actually, the behavioral game theory that I wanted to bring here is because it's they have studied the comparative advantage. If these three dependability, transferability, and confirmability, the level that they should go with, the mix that they should go with to detect the fraud. That's what I wanted to find out in my study, and then I will refine it with your suggestions. One more thing, I have developed this model, but I want to follow a thematic analysis approach. There are after analyzing only, I want to develop a model. Then how to proceed, because I have initiated this model, but after getting the information from the field, only I want to develop a model. How to incorporate that into my study?
It's sort of like, see, in positivistic research, we have a model and we test it, right? So if you're going to do a qualitative research, once you find answers to your research questions and the themes that come up, then you are trying to sort of come up with a sort of a concept mapping or sort of sort of like a framework saying, this sort of seems to lead to this, and because of these things, people behave in such a way, sort of your conclusion. So what I understand is you're trying to come up with a figure or a framework or a model based on your findings, right? So that doesn't have to, that's not your objective, but sort of for people to understand or sort of visually see what your findings you want to sort of, so that's fine. That's okay. That can be done. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I agree with you, Professor, that your findings, the insights that you develop from your study, that need to be presented in some sort of a useful representation, if you like, which managers can use. So something useful you develop out of your insights that organizations can use to say, hey, okay, here's my picture on the wall, and this is what I follow to address these problems, if you like. So that's your framework or set of guidelines or something like that you offer the world, if you like, based on your research and analysis that you have done.
And if you continue with this research, the next step would be then test that model with a larger sample or whatever. Is that all? Anybody has any final say? Professor Rooney, Professor Sohal, or Professor Chong, anything final say, or shall we conclude?
Nothing from me.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing from me too. Thank you.
All good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you very much and all the best.
Yes, good luck.
Let me see. They want it. Okay, there's lightning. Sorry, I mean, you will see my face going all like this because there's lightning and thunder getting quite close by. Right. I would like to say a few closing remarks about the co-presentation, the sessions we had today. So the topics that the students presented were quite diverse, and I would say also very current and interesting. But a common aspect that we found based on the comments from the panelists is they need to think and rethink on what they really want to do. Most of them need to narrow down or focus on what exactly they want to do within that topic, whether it's fraud, whether it's quality in non-state education or digital transformation, whatever it may be, that they need to really focus and be clear on what exactly the so-called variables that they want to study as well. And then depending on what their methodology is going to be, the measurements and their definitions will become very important. So one request is that all of you need to work on your conceptualization a bit more and be clear so that you are really clear what you want to do, because this is the basic foundation. If you all are very not clear yourself what you all are going to study about, the next steps, it will be like really, you will get into real trouble once you collect data. So don't rush into data collection or whatever. Please do a lot of desk research, review of the literature, bounce your ideas and fine tune what you really want to do, because that will really be helpful and it will lead to the successful completion of your doctoral studies, right? You can focus on your methodology later. So try not to bring that in, but be clear what you really want to do. One request for the organizers, one good thing is, thank you for giving enough time for the panel and for the presentation. So we had 45 minutes each for the presentation and the comments, which was really good, because sometimes we are rushing too much and the panelists don't have enough time to give their comments to and have a discussion. So thank you for allocating 45 minutes. That was really good, and also enough time for the presentation. But one request is that the written documents that we received were very brief and not really, at least I didn't find it much helpful to really see and understand what their research was about. Most of them just wrote about their literature review process, about what journals they reviewed or what they looked at, and about the gaps and what the gaps are, but the gaps also wasn't really what they mentioned were not really gaps either. So in future, for your next year, one request would be, rather than this very brief document, maybe they can submit the extended abstract. Maybe not the full concept paper, which might be too long for us to read and come. So something like a compromise would be an extended abstract. There are actual details. All of them talked about a conceptual model, but there was no model included. So we had no idea what they were until they made the presentation. So if they can have an extended abstract, which is like 5, 6, maybe 8 pages long, with more details about the model, the context in which they are going to study and all that, it will be helpful for us to come, the panelists, to come with some idea rather than depending so much on the presentation. So that's one request that I would like to make. Thank you for giving this opportunity to be part of your panel. And I hope, and I have seen the 4 people who made the presentation at your early stages when I came for your coursework teaching. So you have made progress. So hang in there. It's a lonely, hard work, but you all have joined the PhD program to achieve certain things. So hang in there, be self-motivated, and you will get there, right? PhD is not a rocket science. You will get there. It's just that you need to be very systematic, persevere, be resilient, and read a lot, and you will get there, right, with proper guidance. So thank you very much. Any last words from the panel?
Well, I was
No,
going to say that given the digital connectivity, it doesn't have to be a lonely journey anymore. You could be in contact with your fellow PhD, students and people like us overseas and locally. So it's you have so much resource tips, and it could be a very interesting journey, and certainly I feel not a lonely journey anymore.
Yeah, agree with all that.
Yeah. And just one last point. I'm sure we all hope that this is not a session to demoralize our friends. It is in fact a very good session. Sometimes when I was a PhD student myself, I was a very ambitious guy. I wanted to do something that no one had done. But then it is always sessions like this that will remind us, keep us back on the ground. What is doable, what is not. So that is the purpose of sessions like this. So we hope you are not demoralized, but rather give you that sort of the opportunity for you to rethink again what you are doing and sort of arrive at or do some calibration so that we can all be doing something realistic, something that is doable, something that is novel, yet we can collect data and our research will be smooth sailing all the way. I personally have seen some not so fortunate friends who had to change their topic, their approach, just because halfway through they realized that they couldn't proceed with the research. So and that is something that we do not wish to see happening to any of our friends. So we hope that you will take this as a good opportunity for all of us to ponder upon what we have put forward, what is doable, what is not, what is realistic and what is not. And as what Prof. Amrik has said, this is a good opportunity now that Zoom and many other platforms have allowed us to reach out to many people. So make use of this opportunity, talk to different professors, talk to Prof. Pavitra and different professors. We are sure that they are out there, they are always willingly want to offer their hands of help, their advice and their expertise to you. So all the very best to you as you move your research forward. Thank you.
I know for Professor Sohal and Professor Rooney, it's like 10 o'clock in the night. Sorry to have kept you up your bedtime, past your bedtime maybe, or whatever. So really appreciate late into the night, you all are being part of us and giving constructive comments. So thank you, all three of you.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Over to you, Sakundala.
Thank you, Pavitra, and thank you, eminent panel, for that wonderful session. I'm left so inspired. Thank you very much for having spent so much time and having stayed with us all this time, despite it being very late hours. It would be much appreciated if you stay just a few moments more with us to see our director handing over certificates to the presenters today. Sir, can I kindly ask you, our director, Dr. Callum, will distribute the certificates to the presenters right now. Can I call upon the presenters? Ms. Janadari Vijay Singh. Ms. Chandrika Dahanayaka. Professor Ajanta Dharmasiri, can I request you to hand over the other two certificates, please? Mr. Dylan Surya Mudalige. And Ms. Petmi Omalkadi Silva. Thank you very much, Director and Professor Janta, for distributing the certificate. Once again, thank you very much, Professor Amrik Sohal, Professor Jim Rooney, Professor Eddie Chong, and Professor Pavitra Kailasapati for having joined this session. It was so wonderful. Your insights, the feedback was so impressive and very, very useful, critical in this PhD process of the candidates. The presenters, they are just beginners, and they will definitely incorporate this feedback and make the maximum use of it and move forward and produce very good PhD study results, I'm sure. Thank you very much once again for having been part of this. And that brings us to the end of it. Thank you to the presenters, and thank you to all those who have joined with us online. Thank you very much. Good night, good evening.
Thank
Stay
you. Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
you and good
Bye.
night.
Thank you. Stay safe.
All the best.
Thank you.
safe.
Bye.